Just a quick heads up. This video isn't going to go over the whole thing with Kasdom. This is solely going to be about where myths are now and my views on myth games, so keep that in mind. If I say the words Roblox myth, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? For most people, it will probably be something like Chuck Lloyd, the Grocery Gang, Rust010, Gaz, and so on. These myths, along with many others, have gotten extremely popular over the years, and that's thanks to YouTubers like Flamingo, Joker Kid, Creecraft, and many others making videos on them. But it's been years since those days, and you may be asking, where are they now? Well, let's talk about it. I've been playing myth games for years, and although I'm not the most deep into it, as an observer, I'd love to talk about what's up with myths now, why it's genuinely a goldmine of interesting games, how you yourself can find myths, and why Roblox is probably going to end up killing these games soon enough. So, before we get into that, I'm going to quickly explain what a myth even is. If you're watching this, you probably already know, so I'm going to keep this quick. Essentially, the term Roblox myth, at least from what I've seen back then, referred to creepy stories and rumors within Roblox, in a very creepypasta-esque sense. Think John Doe and the March 18 hackings, 1x1x1x1, and so on. These would be comparable to something like Herobrine from Minecraft, just something creepy you might believe actually exists when you were younger. But over the years, however, the term Roblox myth has gained another, more general meaning, this time blurring the lines between myth, regular story-driven game, creepypasta, and ARG. Basically a weird mix of one or more of those things I just mentioned. It refers to any story created by someone that includes characters, usually centered around one mysterious person or a group of mysterious people, whose stories you would be able to uncover usually by playing their respective myth games. Although the story can also be told through video, through, for example, animation, intended to tell a compelling story created out of passion. Now, one unique thing about myths that sets it apart from, let's say, just any other story-driven game is, or was, but we'll get to that, interactability. What I mean by interactability is, you could literally speak to the characters within the story as they're in character. You can get a sense for the characters' personality by the way they speak to you in-game, they can give you a tour around the game, and they can even give you exclusive lore that may otherwise not be possible to figure out by just playing their games. This adds a ton of mystique and uniqueness to these games, and is probably what made myths so fun and engaging back then, even if actually meeting a myth in-game randomly may be somewhat rare. You might have to wait for them to host an event or something, but despite that, the games on their own were still cool, and these interactions, though rare, made them way cooler. I know it's definitely what made myths fun for me. Back when, you didn't need to get an age check to speak to people, but again, we'll get to that. With that out of the way, let's get to the main thing you're here to find out. Where are myths now? Well, they're still here. They never left. In fact, it's possible that you may have already seen a little bit on where they are now. If you were to ask me, what is the most recent myth you can think of that got really popular? To be honest, I'd probably say Daisy's house, and the entire Daisy Bell myth, which got really popular from what I've seen. And again, you may have already seen it, and you may have even played it. Although, I don't know if it's the most recent myth that got popular. The thing is, I don't usually see so many people who are not generally in the myth community making a video on a certain myth, especially in these times, aside from maybe one or two videos here and there from someone. I'm sure that's not exclusive to Daisy, but it's just what I've seen. Maybe I just haven't looked far enough. And to be honest, it's great to see. Now, the reason I bring this up is, if you enjoyed or are interested in the Daisy Bell myth, then that's awesome. Perhaps you would enjoy the other equally great myths out there as well. I mean, for example, have you ever wanted to be depressed? Then I'm sure Concertae is the right game for you. Do you like puzzles? Well, I think you should play Nebula Worlds games. That's just 2 myths, and there are plenty of other very interesting myths with their own interesting stories. The ones I mentioned were just some of the more popular and known ones, and some of my personal favorites. But there's plenty more out there left for people to explore. Many more myths that haven't been covered by the really big YouTubers. If you are like me, and you enjoy games with lore, making series, or just want something new to play, I think you might like these games. And that's something I'd like to put emphasis on. Something new, something unique, something interesting. I'm sure I'm not the only person who has been very tired of the games Roblox has been pushing over the years. You know, typical modern day Roblox game. Your brain rots, your grow gardens, your RNG type games. And I know that many people share that same feeling with me. And for years, myths have been my way out of that. They still are, to be honest. I would play pretty much any game that was simply unique and gave me something different to experience. And that's why I picked up these games. And I would even say that it's because of these myth games that I would end up playing other games like Piafos, for example. The point is, myth games are still being made, and there are plenty of very good ones beyond the ones that most people are familiar with. But, of course, there are also a lot of bad, not very high quality myths. The way I see it, think about it like indie games, right? There are a lot of genuinely really good myths, and a lot that are not super unique or not super made well, using ideas that have been done plenty of times before and get very repetitive, with similar stories and so on. They do exist, and there are quite a lot, and it's just kind of what you notice when you play through enough games and have been around long enough. And I haven't even been in the community super long, so yes, it is an issue. Like, for example, one thing I'm not super into that I see quite often is the family style of myths. Remember the cult family? The Smiles family? Yeah, I notice a lot of family type myths as well, and I don't know, it just kind of gets repetitive, with not much different from one family myth to another. Like I said, when you see it enough times, it gets quite boring. The difference for me, however, is that although the quality of the myth games I find varies, I'd say that most are still interesting and have a cool concept that, at the very least, can get me to play for a little bit, look around, explore, then move on. Don't forget that these games are passion projects, run by one or a few people. But they're trying. And I'm a simple person. For me, trying is enough. And sometimes, among these hundreds of people, looking to make something interesting, every now and then, a new myth comes along and makes something truly amazing. Something compelling. Something that gets me thinking, gets me theorizing. And that's what makes myths so special to me, as someone who likes lore and horror and the likes. Which, of course, makes it hurt even more when you start thinking about how Roblox is killing myths. I had stated previously that one thing that makes myths incredibly interesting, at least for me, is interactability. I understand that the lines between Roblox myth, story-driven games, and full-blown ARGs are quite a bit blurry, and have a ton of overlap. But one thing I find extremely unique about myths is being able to not just observe the story, but actively participate, perhaps even influence it in a way. This is obviously helped by the fact that myths are typically explored in-game, a game that can be readily updated and played by developers acting in character alongside us, the participants. Before I got super into myths, my favorite myth was the Shadelight myth, which you may know from Flamingo. It's the myth with Chuck, Lloyd, Goldity, and all the other weirdos of that group. But the myth seemed to be setting itself up as a sort of race, where Goldity, a major antagonist, is trying to accomplish something, which is getting past the mysterious door in Chuck Lloyd's basement, and we have to stop him, get to it first, whatever. The point is that we get to actively participate, and maybe even influence the ending of the myth, which to me made it very interesting. Fast forward to today, and now you can't even speak to people, isn't that wonderful? So yes, it is now mandatory to age verify in order to be able to speak to people, which does make it more difficult and more inconvenient to engage in not just these myths, but of course, every single game on Roblox where you can interact with other people. Indeed, there are some valid concerns with not wanting to get age verified. I personally don't ever plan to do that, and I'm sure there are many people who feel the same way, justifiably so. Now, if that was the only problem, then it wouldn't be too bad. After all, you don't necessarily need to interact with the myth in order to figure out the story, you can just play their games. But it would seem that even that may become more difficult. Yes, I'm talking about the Roblox Plus and Roblox Kids/Select/Standard update. where, if I understand correctly, developers will need to pay, do an age verification, along with other requirements, to get their games to be playable for players under 16. Otherwise, their games will be restricted to 16+. But I have a feeling that a lot of myth creators don't want to do that. Remember that a lot of these games and stories are made out of passion to tell a story, and not a lot of money is probably going to be made by most of these creators, if any at all, leaving their only choice to be to leave their games 16+. What this means for players is that they will need to do an age verification and be 16+ to even be able to play these games, to which many people, even those 16 and above, don't want to verify. This will obviously lead to a lot of issues for many people. I could be wrong. This update, as I'm making it, isn't even out yet, so maybe I'm getting worked up over nothing. But if I'm right about how this will work, then yes, it will not only affect myth hunters, myth creators now, people who want to become myths, games with inactive players, and Roblox at large. It's kinda part of why I'm making this in the first place, to kinda just speak about my disappointment regarding games I truly do enjoy, on a platform that I truly do care about. But at the end of the day, I suppose there isn't really anything I can do about it. This just is what it is. Now to end on a lighter note, let's talk about finding myths, shall we? Now, the way I usually find myths is by a lot of trial and error. I usually go through a bunch of myth groups, or I guess they're called communities, that's weird. Anyway, I look for a bunch of myth groups and start my search there. I used to look at group walls back when those were a thing. Now it's been replaced by forums, so that's cool, I guess. It looks like it's way harder to find myths here though, so I don't know. Maybe it just isn't being used, but whatever. Another thing I do is go through a group's ranks and look for myths that way. The higher ranking myths are more established and more known to be pretty good, so if you're just starting out, these are the ones you should check out first. As for how to find these groups, I suppose you can look them up in the Roblox search tab. I guess that'll maybe work. But another way I like to do it is by going through the accounts of established myths and seeing the other groups they're in. This is also another way to find other myth accounts, not just groups. In general, just going through these communities is probably the best way to find some interesting stuff. I'm not in any myth hunting Discord if those places exist, but if they do, I don't know, maybe those would be a good place to check out as well. Just throwing that out there. You can also watch videos from myth hunters. That's a good thing to look at as well. And lastly, you can look at myth wikis. There are a ton of myths there that you can find as well. And yeah, that's about it. Actually, there is another way I find myths, and it's through what I call word searches, but I'll talk about that in another video. It's actually how I found the myth that got me into hunting in the first place, but again, that's a story for another time. So, where are myths now? Well, they're still here. There's still plenty of very interesting myths with interesting stories and characters. Yes, not all of it is good. Quality does vary a lot. As I said previously, it's a lot like indie games. There are a ton of gems, but also some that are not as high quality. And they use ideas that have been done before, and that can get kind of repetitive once you see it enough. Although, despite that, most myths still usually have an interesting idea or concept that you may enjoy. And if nothing else, you can just play for a little bit, explore, and then look elsewhere. You can just keep searching. At least until Roblox puts out some update that makes that impossible, so that's cool I guess. Anyway, the way I recommend to look for myths is by going through groups. There you can go through the forums or different ranks in the group, and through the myth accounts there, you can find other myth games that they may have played and other groups that they may be in. I truly believe that myths have a ton of potential that seems to be somewhat overlooked by the community. Not to say that these myths are unknown or anything like that, that definitely is not true. I'm just saying that a lot of myths, even the well-known ones in the community, haven't really caught the public eye, like The Smiles Family, The Grocery Gang, Gaz, Chuck Lloyd, and all the other ones that you may be familiar with. And I think that these myths deserve more attention, so if you're someone who enjoys making series, you like lore, investigating mysteries, or playing mysterious games, and you've been bored of the brain rot games that get pushed so much, or even if you're just someone who wants to play something different, experience something unique, then I think you should consider looking into the myth community, and especially the myths that don't usually get the attention of big YouTubers. I was in your place once, and I found my way out through boredom through these games that I genuinely found passion in, and I consider being the reason I found other games like Piafos. And perhaps it can be the same for you. Unless Roblox decides to drop a nuke on its entire platform, but whatever. The point is, in a world where creativity seems to be getting harder to find, perhaps you would benefit from embracing the weird side of things, and throwing yourself headfirst into the unknown. Oh, and one last thing before I go. Here are some of my personal favorite myths that you may want to check out, along with some other ones that I've personally found to be pretty interesting as well. All linked in the description below. Just be warned though, that some of these games may have disturbing themes, so keep that in mind. Nothing too crazy, but if you're going to get into myth hunting, I think you should be warned. So, anyway, you should check out Nebula World's myth, The Familiar Memory myth, Deliver Me by Courier, The Expedition myth by Houndslawn, The Twilight Bog myth, Mindset by Feinstein, The Aristocracy of Bloom by Equilibrium, Beatsy and the Overall Nightfall Time myth, Concertos by Concertae, alongside its sequel still being made, Sonnets, and lastly Daisy's House as mentioned earlier.